In 1975, a woman in suburban Illinois mixed a packet of pistachio pudding into a can of crushed pineapple, folded in Cool Whip, and brought it to a church potluck. She called it Watergate salad. Nobody knows why, but it was gone before the casseroles. That dessert is number 1 on this list. Number 6 used vinegar instead of lemons. Number 3 had a river of chocolate hidden inside. Hit subscribe because one of these was on your grandmother's table. Let us count them down. 20. Prune Whip. Stewed prunes pureed and folded into stiffly beaten egg whites with sugar and lemon juice. Baked in a water bath until puffed. Under 25 cents. The recipe dates to 1879. President Eisenhower publicly declared it one of his favorite desserts, which briefly made it respectable before the word prune became permanently associated with old age. By the 1970s, Prune Whip was already a punchline, the butt of jokes about bland institutional food. But for decades before that, it was the dessert that proved you could make something beautiful with almost nothing. Light as air with barely any ingredients. The whip texture made something cheap feel elegant. The prune industry eventually spent millions rebranding prunes as dried plums. That rebranding proved how thoroughly Prune Whip's era had ended. 19. Lazy Daisy Cake. A moist oat cake baked in a 9x13 pan and finished under the broiler with a topping of melted butter, brown sugar, and shredded coconut that caramelized into a crunchy praline crust. Under 75 cents. The soaked oats made the cake dense and moist in the best way, almost like pudding. But the real star was the broiled topping. Instead of making frosting and spreading it, you mixed 5 ingredients, poured them on the warm cake, and broiled it for 3 minutes. The coconut turned golden and the brown sugar bubbled into toffee. It was a genuine kitchen hack decades before that word existed. Quaker Oats printed the recipe on their packaging in the 1950s, one of the earliest examples of a food company using recipes to sell ingredients. 18. Grasshopper Pie. Crushed Oreos pressed into a pie plate for the crust, marshmallows melted in milk, crème de menthe and crème de cacao stirred in, whipped cream folded through, the whole thing frozen for 4 hours. $2 to $3. The bright green filling against the dark chocolate crust looked spectacular. The mint chocolate combination was universally loved, and the freezer did all the work. Grasshopper pie was the 1970s dinner party dessert that made every suburban hostess feel like she was running a restaurant. The alcohol made it feel adult. The color made it feel festive. You could make it days ahead and pull it out at the perfect moment. Today, the grasshopper cocktail itself has vanished from most bar menus. It is now considered a grandmother's drink. Both the cocktail and the pie are relics of an era when mint green was the height of elegance. 17. Fruit Cocktail Cake. 1 can of fruit cocktail undrained, mixed with flour, sugar, baking soda, and an egg. 1 bowl, topped with brown sugar, walnuts, and coconut. Baked until golden. Under $1 for a cake that fed 6. The juice from the fruit cocktail was the only liquid. No milk, no butter, no oil. The syrup kept the cake moist, and the fruit studded every slice. Fruit cocktail cake was the dessert of pantry scavenging. When there was nothing else in the house but a can of fruit and some flour and an egg, you could still have cake. By the late 1970s, canned fruit cocktail began its cultural descent. Fresh fruit became available year-round. The very idea of canned fruit started to feel outdated. The cake went with it. 16. Sock It to Me. Cake, a Duncan Hines. Butter recipe cake, mix enriched with sour cream and swirled with a cinnamon pecan filling, baked in a bundt pan and drizzled with a simple glaze. Under $2. The name came from Rowan and Martin's laugh. In where "Sock It to Me" was the catchphrase of the late 1960s. Even Richard Nixon said it on the show in 1968. The sour cream made it impossibly moist. The cinnamon pecan ribbon running through the middle created a surprise inside that made people slice another piece. The bundt shape made a box mix cake look like it came from a bakery. Sock It to Me cake was the pinnacle of back-of-the-box recipe culture, when food companies realized that the recipe on the packaging sold more product than any advertisement could. Here is something worth knowing about 1970s desserts. They were not baked from scratch. They were assembled. A woman in the 1970s did not cream butter and sugar. She opened a box, a can, and a tub. Cake mix, canned fruit, Cool Whip. The genius was in the combinations. She knew that instant pudding mixed into cake batter made it moister. She knew that condensed milk poured over a warm cake soaked into every pore. She knew that a broiler could frost a cake in 3 minutes. These were not shortcuts, they were inventions. Every dessert in the middle of this list was engineered by women who understood that a 25-cent box of pudding mix could do the work of an hour's baking. 15. Ribbon Jell-O. 4 to 6 different flavors of Jell-O set one layer at a time in a 9 by 13 pan, alternating with white layers made from sour cream and unflavored gelatin. Total assembly time, 4 to 6 hours of waiting between layers. Under $1.50 for a massive pan. When you sliced into it and the layers appeared, red, then white, then orange, then white, then green, then white, then purple, people gasped. The flavor was not the point. The visual was. It proved that patients could make grocery store gelatin look like stained glass. Ribbon Jell-O was the 1970s housewife's labor of love that nobody makes anymore because nobody has the patience. A 7-layer version took 5 or 6 hours. It was a dessert that only someone who cared enough to stand at the refrigerator all afternoon would attempt. 14. Impossible Pie. All ingredients blended together and poured into a greased pie plate. During baking, the mixture magically separated into 3 layers. A crust on the bottom, a custard in the middle, and coconut floating to the top. Under $1. It was actual kitchen magic. The flour was heaviest and sank to form the crust. The egg and milk set into custard. The coconut was lightest and rose to the top. No crust to roll, no custard to temper, no separate steps. Impossible Pie was the dessert that convinced a generation of home cooks that they could make pie. The terror of pie crust, the rolling, the chilling, the crimping, the praying it would not shrink, was completely eliminated. 13. 7-layer bars. Graham cracker crumbs pressed into melted butter, then layered with chocolate chips, butterscotch chips, coconut, and chopped pecans. The whole thing drenched with condensed milk and baked until golden. Under $2 for 24 bars. No mixer, no bowl even. You layered everything directly in the baking pan. The condensed milk melted through the layers and cemented everything into something chewy and gooey and crunchy all at once. 7-layer bars had more names than any dessert in American history. Hello Dolly Bars, Magic Cookie Bars, Dream Bars, Everything Bars. Every community renamed them, which proves how independently the recipe spread, from hand to hand, index card to index card, long before the internet. 12. Grape Nuts. Pudding. Grape nut cereal sprinkled in a buttered baking dish, covered with egg custard, dusted with nutmeg, and baked in a water bath until set. Under 50 cents. The cereal sank and softened during baking, forming a dense cake-like layer on the bottom, while smooth custard set on top. Grape Nuts pudding was New England's diner dessert. The thing you ate after a bowl of chowder in a booth with a paper placemat. Nearly every diner from Maine to Connecticut had it on the menu through the 1970s. When the diners started closing in the 1990s, the pudding went with them. The cereal itself contains neither grapes nor nuts. The pudding that sustained it for generations was more honest. It was exactly what it claimed to be. Here is what the history books leave out about 1970s desserts. They were made by women who had no time. A woman in 1973 worked 8 hours, drove home, made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and still put dessert on the table. She did not have 2 hours for a layer cake. She had 20 minutes and a can of condensed milk and a box of something from the shelf. The desserts on this list are not lazy. They are evidence of women solving the same problem every night. How do I put something sweet on this table before these children go to bed? The answer was always the pantry. Always the shortcut. Always the trick that turned 5 cheap ingredients into something the family remembered. 11. Eclair cake. graham crackers layered with a mixture of instant vanilla pudding and Cool Whip, topped with canned chocolate frosting, refrigerated overnight. Under $2.50 for a pan, serving 15. Zero baking, zero cooking, zero skill. The overnight refrigeration transformed crispy graham crackers into soft cake, like layers that mimicked the pastry in an actual eclair. The moisture from the pudding migrated into the crackers and hydrated them into something that felt baked. It had just sat in the refrigerator all night and turned into dessert by morning. 10. Millionaire Pie. Condensed milk mixed with lemon juice, which thickened it instantly without heat or eggs. Drained crushed pineapple, coconut, and pecans folded in with Cool Whip. Poured into 2 graham cracker crusts, under $1.50 for 2 entire pies. The name was aspirational. It tasted rich, but cost almost nothing. Millionaire Pie came from Furr's Cafeteria in the South, where you could get a slice for 50 cents that tasted like something from a restaurant with tablecloths. When Southern cafeteria chains began closing in the 2000s, Furr's among them, Millionaire Pie went with them. The pie was inseparable from the family cafeteria dining that no longer exists. 9. Lemon Chiffon Pie. Egg yolks, thickened with lemon juice and sugar over a double boiler. Gelatin dissolved in. The mixture cooled. Then stiffly beaten egg whites folded through, and the whole thing poured into a crust and chilled. Under $1. The texture was like eating a cloud, impossibly light and barely there. Chiffon pie was the victim of salmonella paranoia. By the 1980s, food safety warnings about raw or lightly cooked eggs became widespread, and an entire category of American dessert vanished. Not because it stopped tasting good, but because people got scared. 8. Sawdust Pie. Equal parts graham cracker crumbs, coconut, and chopped pecans held together by unbeaten egg whites, baked until golden, served with whipped cream and sliced bananas. Under $1.50. Patty Tuller created it in Grand Rivers, Kentucky, a town of 400 people near Kentucky Lake. Bon Appetit published the recipe in 1983, and it still did not go mainstream. Sawdust pie is the dessert that never left its hometown. Beloved by everyone who has had it, unknown to everyone who has not. The texture was unlike any other pie. Crunchy on the outside, chewy and gooey in the middle, almost praline-like. Grand Rivers has 400 residents and 1 famous pie, and that is apparently not enough for the rest of America to notice. 7. Watergate Cake. A white cake mix combined with a packet of pistachio instant pudding, club soda, and chopped walnuts. Frosted with pistachio pudding, folded into Cool Whip, under $2. A Chicago food editor renamed the original pistachio pineapple delight to Watergate Salad to capitalize on the scandal. The cake version followed immediately. The pudding mix in the batter made it extraordinarily moist. The pistachio flavor was subtle and nutty. The green color was otherworldly. And the name Watergate guaranteed that everyone at the potluck would ask about it. Kraft resisted the name, but surrendered when thousands of requests came in asking specifically for Watergate cake. 6. Vinegar pie, sugar, flour, egg yolks, butter, water, and apple cider vinegar baked into a custard in an unbaked pie shell, topped with meringue from the leftover whites. Under 25 cents. Every single ingredient lived in the pantry already. Vinegar pie was a desperation pie from the 19th century that survived through the Depression, through rationing, and lingered in Appalachian kitchens into the 1970s. It was born from the problem of making pie when you had no fruit, no lemon, no chocolate. Vinegar provided the tartness that lemon juice would normally supply. The custard set smooth and silky. The nutmeg added warmth. When topped with meringue, it was genuinely hard to distinguish from lemon meringue pie. A recipe this clever deserved a better name than desperation pie. 5. Glorified rice, cooked white rice mixed with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream. Served cold, under 50 cents. This was the dessert of the upper Midwest, specifically Minnesota, where Scandinavian immigrants had brought rice pudding traditions, and their American grandchildren had added canned pineapple and marshmallows. Glorified rice transformed leftover rice, the cheapest and most boring food on earth, into something festive. It occupied a specific spot on the Lutheran Church potluck buffet, after the savory items, but before the real desserts and coffee. Nobody remembers the Norwegian rice pudding that started it. They just remember the glorified version. 4. Dream Whip Pie. A packet of Dream Whip topping mix, whipped with milk and folded into instant pudding, poured into a graham cracker crust, under 75 cents. Dream Whip was the pantry staple of rural America. In towns where the grocery store was 30 miles away and you shopped every 2 weeks, Dream Whip on the shelf meant you could always make dessert, no fresh cream needed. The powder sat in the cupboard for months, waiting for the evening someone wanted pie. Dream Whip still exists, but it has been pushed to the bottom shelf by Cool Whip and Ready Whip. The product that once freed rural cooks from needing fresh cream is now a relic itself. 3. Tunnel of Fudge Cake. Nearly 2 sticks of butter, 6 eggs, sugar, powdered sugar, cocoa, flour, and chopped walnuts beaten together and baked in a bundt pan at exactly the right temperature, so the outside set firm while the center stayed underbaked, creating a tunnel of molten fudge running through the middle. $3 to $4. Ella Helfrich of Houston submitted it to the 1966 Pillsbury Bake Off. It came in second place. It was the recipe everyone wanted. Pillsbury's phone lines jammed. Nordic Ware received 200,000 requests for bundt pans. One recipe, one competition, and the bundt pan went from obscure kitchen equipment to essential American bakeware. The Gooey Fudge Center was the original lava cake concept, decades before molten chocolate cake became a restaurant staple. 2 better than sex cake. Chocolate cake baked from a box, poked full of holes, while warm, condensed milk and caramel sauce poured into every pore, cooled, covered with Cool Whip, and showered with crushed toffee bars. $3 to $3.50. The name scandalized church basements. Too provocative for the recipe card box at First Baptist, but too good not to make. Churches renamed it. Better than anything cake. Oh my cake, holy cow cake. Everyone knew what it was really called. The cake was engineered for maximum richness. Every hole in the warm cake became a channel for condensed milk and caramel to flood the interior. The Cool Whip cut the sweetness just enough, and the toffee crunch on top added the only texture that was not pure softness. It was always the first dessert gone at the potluck. Always. 1. Watergate Salad. 1 packet of pistachio instant pudding mix folded dry into a can of undrained crushed pineapple. The juice hydrated the pudding. Miniature marshmallows and chopped pecans stirred in. Cool Whip folded through. Refrigerated for 1 hour. 5 ingredients. 1 bowl. 0 cooking. 0 baking. Under $1. Watergate salad is the most ironically named dish in American history. A fluffy green dessert named after the worst political scandal of the 20th century. Kraft's Test Kitchen created the original recipe and called it Pistachio Pineapple Delight. An unnamed Chicago food editor renamed it Watergate Salad, and the name stuck permanently. Nobody knows exactly why. Kraft never called it that. But Americans loved the joke of bringing something called Watergate to a family gathering, and the name became inseparable from the dish. The pineapple juice activating the dry pudding mix was a textural trick that made it thicker and more intense than prepared pudding. The marshmallows added chew. The pecans added crunch. The Cool Whip made it light enough to eat an entire bowl without guilt. It crossed every line in American food. Class, region, generation. Everyone made it. Everyone ate it. Watergate salad is a perfect time capsule of 1975 America. A country so saturated with scandal that even dessert could not escape it. Make one of these this week. Just one. The impossible pie, the fruit cocktail cake, the vinegar pie. Buy a box of pudding mix and a can of pineapple for a couple of dollars and make something that appeared on every potluck table in America 50 years ago. Sit down at the table. Set a place. Eat it slow. Tell me in the comments which one your family made. I want to know if anyone still makes ribbon jello with 7 layers. I want to know if the tunnel of fudge cake still comes out of someone's bundt pan. I want to know if these desserts still live in someone's kitchen. Because these were not just desserts. They were 20 ways a woman looked at a pantry shelf full of boxes and cans and packets and said, "I will put something sweet on this table tonight." That is not shortcuts. That is the most creative thing ever done with a box of pudding mix and a tub of Cool Whip.